Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast. Oh my gosh, the Biden cover-up is like 100% worse and getting worser. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back. Another edition of the Right Guys podcast. My name is Max McGuire here with Mr. Producer Josh Hammerling. Just real quick, posting the link for this on all of my socials because there's a lot to get into. We knew we were going to be talking about this week, regardless, because the Jake Tapper book is coming out, or they actually might be canceling it. I mean, that's how crazy this is now becoming. The Jake Tapper book talking about Joe Biden's cognitive decline.
Which
coming
is a
out
shock
this
to
week.
everyone. It's a shock to everyone, Max.
We
It's a
had
shock
the
to
Her tapes drop over the weekend,
everyone.
showing Biden clearly out of his element, unable to really even do an FBI interview. It makes you really understand why the FBI concluded, or at least the special counsel concluded, that if they put him on the stand, people would have sympathy for him because he's just that far gone. Now, this latest news that Joe Biden has prostate cancer. You're seeing lots of people in the media using this to say, okay, now no more talking about the cover-up. Josh, this diagnosis demands even more discussion about the cover-up, not because we want to play politics with the diagnosis. Cancer sucks. Everyone knows cancer sucks. Hope and pray that Joe Biden can beat this. But also, it would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that my thoughts and prayers would be far more powerful if I was thinking and praying it when he actually got diagnosed. Because the more I'm reading about this, the less I believe that he got diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer. This past weekend.
Well, yeah, there's been a couple of sound bites of one of the doctors on the 24th. I think it's a Gupta was saying that they can't find the current information for the LSAT or something like their LSAT tests for PSAs for colon cancer in the latest update. Now every president before him has it listed, at least up to 3 had it listed, but in this last update for Joe Biden just didn't exist, and that's over a year old. So I have very many doubts that.
Well, it was actually not over a year old. It was last summer, so it's 10 months ago.
10 months ago. So we're up against a year, right? Still, that's in the cancer world. That's a long time.
But not for this type of cancer. What I've been reading is that the most aggressive form of this prostate cancer, the fastest it can go from 0 to stage 4 metastasized to the bones, right? They say 1 to 3 years. That's the fast version, which you don't want to make light of it. But if this is truly the first time that Joe Biden has been diagnosed, that is worth studying, if only because they just discovered the fastest developing form of this cancer ever recorded.
And even if it is the fast version, that means his entire presidency, or at least 3/4 of it, was plagued by this health injury, this health problem, which is shocking in itself. Right. And then, so either kudos for him for sticking to the job, or shame on Joe Biden for making him continue to work every day, because that's one of those diagnoses at his age. And I think it's another comorbidity for dementia, isn't it? This particular kind of cancer. So it's like a double whammy on it.
It is. It's not that this has a comorbidity necessarily for dementia. The issue is, and I'm going to explain this as best I can. There's a lot of crossover in the discussion we've had about transgender medicines, because the medicine that when you have a prostate cancer that responds to hormone treatments, I mean, we might as well read what they put out so we make sure we're getting this right. Here, I'm sharing my screen. This is the statement put out by Joe Biden and his team. Last week, President Joe Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, with metastasis to the bone. While this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians.
Good Lord.
So what they're basically saying when they say hormone sensitive allowing for effective management is because it grows on the prostate. One of the treatments is basically Lupron. Lupron is the drug that they use to medically castrate sex offenders.
Mhm.
It's also the drug that Democrats like giving to little kids to stop their body's production of testosterone if they believe
Unreal.
that they're transgender. That's what it does. It stops your body's production of testosterone because this cancer grows on the prostate. It's in many ways fueled by testosterone. You deprive it of testosterone, it doesn't grow. That would allow you to hit it with other treatments. A lot
Yeah.
different when it's metastasized to other parts of the body. It's a lot more difficult. But yes, interestingly, and as much as you can say this is interesting, one of the side effects, and this has actually been documented in multiple studies, one of the side effects of giving this hormone blocker to prostate cancer patients is that they've seen it advance people who have already on the trajectory of Alzheimer's or dementia, or potentially even cause Alzheimer's and dementia in cases that wouldn't have already had it. Here is one of the cases. ADT treatment leads to cognitive decline in prostate cancer patients. Adjusted scores show lower performance in metastatic prostate cancer patients compared to healthy controls. So what is that essentially? Here's
That's terrible. Yeah.
let's read the most recent case. Was a huge case out of UPenn. Huge case out of UPenn, and this is what they publish. For patients with prostate cancer, treating the disease with androgen deprivation therapy, ADT, blocking the is linked to a higher likelihood of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or dementia compared to patients who do not receive the therapy, according to a study from researchers in the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. Of the 154,089 men sampled for the study, 62,330 received ADT within 2 years of the prostate cancer diagnosis, and 91,759 did not. Of the patients with prostate cancer who received hormone therapy, 13% were later diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, compared to 9% who did not receive ADT. For dementia, those numbers widened. 22% of the prostate cancer patients who received ADT were diagnosed with dementia, compared to 16%, 16% who did not receive the therapy.
An alarming increase.
The lifetime risk for Alzheimer's dementia for men overall is 12%. So you can argue that this is already a class of people who, even the control group was above the national average, right?
Yeah.
But for both of those things, both Alzheimer's and dementia, this study, case study looking at 154,000 plus cases, found that there was at least a slight increase in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's and dementia among people who had men who had prostate cancer and treated it with hormone blockers. And one of the reasons for that, I'm reading way too much. I'm not going to butcher all of it, but depriving your body of the hormones makes it more difficult for your brain to repair synapses, things like that. We talked about this on the podcast in terms of giving this treatment to underage children. Puberty is an essential part of brain development. When you deny your body of puberty hormones, you deprive your body of the hormones you need for brain development. It is not surprising that in this stage of life, towards the end of life, it could also then cause Alzheimer's or dementia. Now, you can't say definitively, but it does make it interesting looking at what we've all seen. Was Joe Biden in the grips of dementia and Alzheimer's, or was he suffering the results of a medical treatment for a prostate cancer that he's had for years and has refused to tell anyone, right?
Certainly could have exacerbated things, because I feel like, and this is just my opinion, something like this has probably been with him for a while. One of the reasons he probably didn't want to run originally is that might have been on the radar. And then as they're treating him, they knew it was going to get worse to a guy that's already started to experience the onset of dementia, right? These 4 years could have been a complete torture for him physiologically, especially when it comes to this treatment. Could you imagine being the president of the United States? And it would explain why they would put a lid at 10 o'clock in the morning on a lot of his stuff. I mean, he just didn't have the energy. The man was fighting cancer at the same time that They were giving him drugs to be awake and alert around the world. I mean, there's so much going on here. Whoever it was just plying Joe Biden full of treatments, drugs, probably amphetamines. There's no telling the list of what went into his body. I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did. But knowing that he had that and going into the election, you had to know that there was a chance he dies in office, right? There's a chance that he dies before his presidency's up. Now, was that part of the plan or not? I don't know, because we're still just looking at the cancer and who knew it and when did we know it sort of parts, right?
Here is the report that the physician to the president released to the public. And among all the other labs, this said the labs not specifically mentioned above. He said comprehensive metabolic panel was normal to include electrolytes, creatinine, blood, urea, nitrogen, protein, yada, yada. Urinalysis was normal, complete blood count normal, vitamin D normal. All these things are normal. But Josh, I've had blood drawn and there are a lot more tests than this.
Sure.
If this was just a random person who at 82 years old walked into a doctor's office, complained about urinary symptoms, right? And said, "Hey doc, take a look." And he said, "I haven't been to a doctor in 20 years." Then it might make sense that they just finally caught it, stage 4 metastasized to the bone. This was the president of the United States with a physician in the White House having his physicals being performed by the top doctors, I believe, at Bethesda Neva Hospital, right? There were also multiple situations where he was, I won't want to say hospitalized, but taken out of service from illnesses and whatnot. Remember when he said he got COVID?
Yeah, it's a COVID thing.
There were lots of opportunities over his whole presidency to get blood work done. I can't believe that they wouldn't have done the PSA test. Now, the PSA test is imperfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is highly likely that the PSA test would have caught it, if only to have had it done last year, right? Because if it's stage 3 now, or stage 4 now, is probably stage 2 or 3 last year, probably would have caught it. So as heartless as it feels to try and like we were all going to talk about is cognitive decline. Well, cognitive decline might have been caused by treatment to this. It sucks, but every one of these scandals, it's all about what did you know? When did you know it? It's hard because this is really one of two things. Either this doctor failed and the whole team of doctors failed to perform one of the most ordinary routine tests that men in this age group should get, right? If you're going to get cancer at this age, prostate cancer is one of the most common ones to get, right? Did they do it? Positive. He says, hush, hush, hush. I don't want anyone to know. Or did they, for whatever reason, not give him the test that seems like it would just be the obvious one to include in the blood panel? That's the question.
I know. And then it makes me want to look at the timeline of behaviors, schedules. There's a way to figure this out. The real tragedy here is that we were being lied to the American people. Those doctors don't answer to Joe Biden when they do this stuff. They answer to us because we have to know whether our leader is fit or not. And if they are not fit, there is a clause in the Constitution that says this is how you deal with that. So I'm okay. I feel bad for Joe Biden. He has cancer, but I'm pissed off that they lied to us about it. The whole apparatus lied to us about it. Joe Biden lied to us. Tapper, all the people that are out there saying that he was in perfect health, sharp as a tack. Were they lying to us through their teeth? They had to have been. And that makes them complicit at this point in a giant lie.
The mental decline part, absolutely. Because for Jake Tapper's many things, one thing he never did was digitally inspect Joe Biden's prostate, right? I mean, maybe he did. Maybe the White House,
doubts.
Maybe the White House media relationship really is that weird. But I'll go out on a limb and say all of the media personalities covering for Biden did not digitally inspect his prostate. And just for all the kids at home, digitally does not mean on the internet.
Thermometer.
It means the digit of your finger.
Yeah. But they don't have to because they know it. You know how hard it used to.
The cognitive decline is obvious, right?
Yeah.
That part's obvious.
We used to have discussions about how hard it is to keep secrets in government, right?
Yeah.
If there were UFOs out there, people would have already said it. They would already put a book out, yada, yada, yada. It's hard to keep secrets in Washington, D.C. How did Joe Biden keep this a secret for so long without the media actually reporting it and doing their due diligence? The information may have been floating around there longer than we think. And if that's the case, like heads need to roll for this because the very leader of the United States was incapable of running the office. So let's see that timeline. When did they know it? When was it first discussed?
Yeah.
That year, the 2024 election, there were odd things happening behind the scenes. Rules were being changed. I think we're starting to see the reason for all that behavior by the Democrats on making sure that they could just get Joe Biden out of the way and Kamala Harris in, because I think there was a plan from the start.
Yeah. One of the things that I believe, I was reading some analysis, some people got the book early. One of the things they said to expect from Jake Tapper's book is explanations on just how hard it was for Joe Biden's team to piece together his videos, edit them together to make him look like an actual human. Like, do you remember when he did the call out of Trump, calling him out saying, yeah, I'll debate you?
Yeah. And they had like 3 or 4.
There were like 15 cuts. Every word was a cut to a different angle, right? A cut to a different one. It's like he couldn't do it. So they had to film it 20 times and piece it together to make it work. Apparently, that's how much of the presidency was. Anything that wasn't live that they could fake, they did it that way. And there's even reason to believe that they faked some of the live stuff by having them be scripted questions with scripted answers. Nothing off the cuff, nothing surprising.
Well, it would explain the Joe Biden wrist cuff pictures, right? Like a quarterback would use. All right, I'll take this number, this question from CNN and then they'd have to have a face with the name. Who else needs that besides a person that can't remember people that follow you? It's so crazy.
This is a transcript. This is a transcript of the Her interview. We're not going to play it because everyone's played the main 5 minutes, and then the other one's like hours long, five some hours long. I didn't even get through it all. I was listening on 2x speed and I just started falling asleep. It's just like there's only so much Joe Biden nonsense you can listen to. Here's a transcript, though, that is interesting in the context. Like, part of this is looking back, was that a gaffe or was that him saying the quiet part out loud, admitting it? So this was him talking about to her about what he was working on. And this is the part that is a little interesting today. These are all he says, quote, these are all the subjects that related to, most of them, the moonshot with blank. The moonshot was cancer, and blank was one of my docs who operate on me. Yes, sir, at Walter Reed. Now he's had lots of surgeries, right? And maybe this is Joe Biden just piecing things together. Yeah. The transcript has it as a comma. Maybe it was maybe it was a period. Maybe it was a full other thought. But that's something that we're looking at. It was that an admission that he had a surgery that we didn't know about. Was that surgery related to cancer that we didn't know about? It's one of those things you have to ask. And we'll pull up. This is Dr. Drew. I mean, of all places, fine. But Dr. Drew says, quote, to be fair, this is him responding to this. To be fair, beginning with the finding of a nodule and then discovering an advanced disease does not pass the sniff test. Someone not receiving adequate or routine health care, this would make some sense, but does not fit the level of medical supervision given to POTUS. Exactly what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
You don't accidentally discover. That's part of the reason that they have yearly physicals and they have even more frequent doctor's appointments to manage stuff, right? The yearly physical is yearly physical. You see your doctor more often as president than just once a year. You would think they would catch it. So again, either this is the worst cover-up this country has seen in a very long time, which the title of the episode today live is Biden cover-up just got 100% worse, 100 times worse. Either this is the worst cover-up ever, or it is the greatest failure of the medical apparatus around the president that we've ever seen.
Yeah, and
Either they covered it up or they missed it. And I don't know how a president getting into office at 78, leaving office at 81, 82. I don't know how you can go through 4 presidential physicals and miss prostate cancer. I don't know how it's possible.
It's not a failure of the medical establishment around him. It's the failure of the truth, and the Democrats telling the truth. I mean, there's been so many lies since the 2020 election that they've been a part of, and here is just another one that's coming to light. And it took a different president to be in office to get there. This is insane. There's nothing the Democrats won't do to try to keep and obtain power, and you see that there because they were going to run this guy most likely knowing that he was dying of stage 3, stage 4 cancer somewhere there. I don't know the dates, right? I would love to know the timeline. I'd love to know the truth. I think the American people are owed the truth for when this stuff was happening. But we start looking at the last part of his presidency when the special meeting happens after the debate. That's the only thing that blew the lid off of the Joe Biden presidency. If he gets through that debate, we have a Joe Biden president. It would have been really hard to beat the incumbent. You know, we'd be looking at 4 more years, most likely of Kamala Harris, because we brought up on this show, like, how does he get into office and step away? You know,
well, that was that was a clip that I didn't play. I didn't pull up, but it was one clip where he's joking with Kamala Harris that if at any point we just disagree, I would disagree with Obama, I'd just get some disease and slip away. Right. That was the joke. And she's like smiling like awkwardly. Here's another clip, which at the time, the Biden White House said this was a gaffe, but this was a clip of him saying that he has cancer, not past tense had cancer, not potential future case could have cancer. This is him saying he has cancer.
And because it was a 4-lane highway.
I'm sorry, I have to remove this first.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? It had to put on their windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
Wow.
That's why he and so many other his people who grew up there have cancer. Now, the White House said that was a gaffe, that he meant to say that he had cancer because he's had skin cancer lesions removed before. Whether or not those particulates in the air would cause skin cancer is a different thing all entirely. But that is literally a video of him saying he has cancer. You can say it was a gaffe. You can say he is a slip of the tongue. But the timeline for this would fit. If it's stage 4 metastasized to the bone now, it is entirely possible, timeline-wise, that him at this point would have received that diagnosis. The other clip that I pulled was after he dropped out of the race, and CBS News talked to his brother Frank. And we covered it at the time and said that's a really weird thing to say for someone who's apparently not sick. His brother Frank told CBS News that he's happy Joe Biden's leaving the race so they can spend what time they have left with him.
News had a brief conversation with Frank Biden, one of President Biden's 2 younger brothers, and here's what he told us. He said, "I'm incredibly proud of my brother. Selfishly, I will have him back to enjoy whatever time we have left. He is a genuine hero. Country over self. It sounds corny in our cynical political environment, but he nor I are cynical. The goal remains the same: defeat Trump and continue the work that Joe has done. My hope is that our party rallies around."
Yeah, we've already heard the part that selfishly they'll have him for what time he has left, or what little time he has left. That is not something you say about your completely healthy brother. Now, you can say that as an 82-year-old, and that's how they played it off at the time. Oh, well, he's 81, 82. None of us knows how long we have left. But again, looking in hindsight, knowing what we know now, knowing that this cancer likely was already diagnosed a year, if not longer ago, that kind of statement makes a lot more sense today than it did 2 days ago.
Okay. All right. So post this. It's post Trump debate. I asked you a question. I was like, what kind of leverage do they really have to make Joe Biden drop out of the race? What's the leverage? I think this is the leverage. I think they knew that he was on his way out.
Yeah.
They knew they could invoke the 14th Amendment because he's got major medical problems. So again, who knew about this? When did they know it? And when were they going to decide to tell us all about it? Long after he would have won a second term and had to drop out, making Kamala Harris president, giving her 2 years plus maybe another 8. I mean, that's a scary proposition, but it was the plan. It feels like the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Someone else learning about that and threatening to release it could obviously have been part of the leverage that was applied. Because we know they applied leverage. We know they forced him out, right? If that got out, it's entirely possible that could have. I mean, we were always assuming it had something to do with the Alzheimer's, with the dementia, cognitive decline, whatever it actually was. Yeah, well, yeah. It's entirely possible that this is to blame. This just got posted by Mark Mitchell, who runs Rasmussen Polling. This is the Google search results for Biden cover-up. It is now trending to off the charts. Biden cover-up. It's basically rated like 100 is like everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
It's been little spikes at 25, up to 25 here and there. Right now, there are so many people searching and talking about this that the search term in Google Analytics, it's off the charts. It is as popular of a search term as you get, which is saying something considering how much weird stuff people search for and talk about on the internet. What did he know? When did he know it?
Fishy. You know how many of us were put on like Facebook jail because we agreed with the her interview, or people even talked about the her interview? Oh, they got fact checked left and right by what was Twitter at the time, what was Facebook, being run by a bunch of super leftists.
Yeah.
And here we are looking at the fruition of that being real. It was a conspiracy theory to talk about it. And now it's real. And I want to throw this at you, Max. How many videos were faked, and how many? I used to say it looks like Joe Biden has a double out there, and you're like, no, that's just too hard. There's no way. I think everything's back on the table with that stuff.
Well, that
what are
was
they willing to lie about.
That was in the early stages of like AI face swaps and AI like filters. I mean, I ran one here on the podcast once of make my eyes constantly look at the camera, and you said it made me look weird. You could notice it, right?
It was crazy, yeah.
It's entirely possible that they did that. I think it's very likely based on what we know about the editing. Like I've seen reports that the editors like wanted to quit.
Would you
like imagine
hours
being handed a pile of dog crap and say, hey, make this guy look presidential. It's very hard to do. And yet that's what they were called to do.
And they were using live action footage. I mean, there had to be a point where they were calling people saying, hey, we need an AI product. I think definitely nearing the end of his presidency, it was probably used. But once he was out of the race, they didn't give, there was no focus on Joe Biden. It also might explain why there was a sudden disappearance of him right after the presidency. I know a lot of presidents do that. Obama didn't, but Joe Biden kind of dropped off the face of the earth for a little while, probably because he's starting to get treatment or continuing treatment. So, I mean, there is this outside chance that they just discovered it, but I have serious doubts about that. It's just too perfect. It starts putting all the bows on all of the things we were talking about and tidying them all up. It shows you they were lying left and right, and we knew it. The vindication for people that were thrown out, thrown under the bus on social media has to be.
Well, Josh, what about this? What about the January Sixers who were sent to prison even though they had cancer diagnoses?
Yeah, there was 3 or 4 of those, weren't there?
Yeah.
Or maybe there was a few. Yeah. What about? Yeah, exactly. So what about them?
Like the left is now claiming, oh, that this cancer diagnosis makes Joe Biden off limits. You can't talk about it, can't release the book, can't talk about the hurt tapes. He is dying. Let the man die in peace. Where was that sympathy for the people who had cancer or had other illnesses,
Yeah.
and were incarcerated under January 6th, the January 6th witch hunt? Where was the sympathy for them? There was none. I'm not saying you throw the book at Joe Biden. If this is a terminal diagnosis, then it makes very little sense to spend taxpayer money to lock him up. Like realistically, it makes no sense.
Max,
Now that's not saying you shouldn't investigate everything that happened, because I guarantee you the laws that he broke, he did not break them and violate them alone.
I think we need to look at the treatment he received and when he treated it, especially if it's the time when he started handing out a whole bunch of pardons. We need to look at all of the official signings that he did with AutoPin, because if there's a record of him being out and having treatment at the same time these things are happening, I don't think Joe Biden remembers it or would remember it. There might be this trail of timelines out there from treatments that exist out there. There has to be. I mean, are they just going to go? Would they leave it untreated if they knew about it?
Well, here's the thing. HIPAA still applies when you're the president, right?
Sure.
He still has a right to medical privacy. So the alternative would be that the doctor doesn't work for him. The doctor, as you said, works for the American people, and the American people are entitled to know everything about the president's health. I could see how that could be problematic, especially if there are things that might not necessarily stop him from doing the job, but might be a little bit embarrassing. Also, what happens if you're a Republican president and you get a far left doctor who decides to write it up, making it look like you're unfit, right?
Yeah. Totally,
to put their finger on the scale. So there isn't a good solution either way, but there has to be a solution where if the president of the United States has a terminal diagnosis, you can't keep that secret, right? Not talking about the things where it's subjective, like is this high blood pressure? Is this high blood pressure? Not talking about that. I'm talking about the diagnosis of prostate cancer. There is no way. The more I read about it, the more I hear about it, I am unconvinced it could be possible for a president under that much medical supervision to have only learned about prostate cancer diagnosis this year. And with Max, with the unlikelihood of it advancing that quickly, I don't see how it's possible.
If they were giving him the brain drugs, they would have been very careful when and where they applied those drugs, because there's no telling what he could have been on if treatment was occurring. I mean, he could have been on a bevy of drugs, a laundry list of drugs on top of that. So there may be indications there with those drugs when this started happening. But imagine when they kept giving him the brain juice to keep him going. I mean, how often were the doctors putting his life on the line just to make him look healthy? That alone is like trying to kill the president almost.
That's the other thing that needs to be talked about here, right? One of two things likely happened. Either the White House doctor and all the people at Walter Reed were in on it, or Joe Biden had a separate doctor treating him for this, and they really kept them out of the loop. It would be very hard to do. I guess you could order them not to do any of the tests for prostate cancer. I mean, that's a little weird. I think if you were a doctor, you might find that a little strange. But either way, right, you run the risk, like, especially if it's keeping it secret from other doctors, you run the risk of being prescribed medications that counteract each other, that put you in danger, right? When you're taking a lot of meds, which Joe Biden was on different meds for different things, you run the risk of putting him on something that could kill him. So the libertarian part of me says that your medical history is your medical history. No one has a right to it. The other part of me understands that no, the American people have to have a right to something, but whatever system comes out of this, which is going to have to be an investigation, there's going to have to be a task force to investigate this and get to the bottom of this and recommend changes. Whatever system comes out of this has to be designed to make sure this never happens again. Because the risk is too significant. I have the clip. Did you see the clip of JD Vance?
I saw that he was in Rome. I saw a few.
He
Did
met with the
there.
Pope. Here is JD
Yeah.
Vance on the plane being asked about this.
Speaking of Joe Biden, sir, do you have any thoughts on his diagnosis?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Like, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. And this is the guy who carries around the nuclear football for the world's largest nuclear arsenal. This is not child's play, and we can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job. Okay, thank you guys.
Boom.
Have a safe.
That's a mic drop statement.
Mic drop statement. Josh, I think getting to the bottom of this could possibly be the easiest thing that the congressional GOP could do.
Yeah.
I think just in terms of access to records, subpoenaing, figuring it out, it's one of the least controversial things because even Democrats recognize that Joe Biden had something mentally wrong with him. Now we're being told, surprise, stage 4 metastatic cancer diagnosis that we super promise wasn't diagnosed earlier. Like I said a couple minutes ago, either it was hidden from the American people that demands an investigation, or the most significant medical supervision program in the country, which is making sure the president of the United States is healthy, failed. In which case that requires a full investigation. No matter what the investigation finds, it's important to know what happened, because either of those outcomes or any combination of those outcomes, knowing what happened is vitally important to ensuring it never happens again. And Josh, if Joe Biden demanded the date, Joe Biden demanded the debate. He's the one who called out Trump.
Yeah.
If he had not called out Trump and demanded a debate date and had waited until the normal debate times, which is right before the election,
wow, we
would have had a terminally ill patient on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've ever known somebody with dementia, there comes a point where they cannot start making decisions for themselves legally because they're not of sound mind, right? They can't start signing legal documents. They can't go before a lawyer. In most cases, they can't even run their own estate, right? So when was Joe Biden at a state, or is he at a state where he couldn't make those decisions? And if so, if he couldn't make his own financial decisions, if he was inside this dementia, why was he running the United States of America? Who was running the United States of America at that point? Because Joe Biden was essentially, there comes a point where you have to give somebody the power of attorney over someone so that those decisions can be made. Did that ever occur? Did it occur before he became president of the United States? Because these are questions I want to know, because who's making all these calls on behalf of Joe Biden alone, on behalf of the president of the United States? Because someone had to say, pump him up full of the brain juice. Yeah, go ahead and give him the treatment. Just throw everything at him, keep him up, and then put him to bed when he's not useful. That sounds like a really bad wife right there. I mean, that sounds like Dr. Jill Biden is something special.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna keep looking into this. We'll be following all the things. We're not gonna get in his medical records or anything, but we're gonna keep following this because this is something that deserves to be filed. It deserves to be reported on. Listen, I have been saying that there's something wrong with Joe Biden ever since I saw him on the campaign trail in 2020, where he was in New Hampshire for the First Nation primary, and for some reason thought he was in. For some reason thought he was in Vermont, And that to me was a moment where I said, okay, that's not normal. It's one thing to fly different places and not know where you are, but you know it's the New Hampshire primary, your political machine, you know.
Yeah, this is your place.
Yeah. It's entirely possible that everything we've seen, if he's had this for as long as other people have had this type of cancer, which would again be a really hard thing to cover up. It'd be a really hard thing to cover
The
up.
lies, though.
The lies. And that's the problem with big lies. The bigger the lie, the harder it is to cover it up. If it's one thing to tell your doctor, hey, don't tell anyone. But then there's the lab techs. Then if you're getting radiation, it's all of the radiation techs, right? The MRIs, the CAT scans, like the list goes on and on and on, right? So to think that this went on for years, it's just a very big lie, which is why part of me thinks that part of me wonders, is this just the biggest catastrophic collapse of the most important health monitoring system we have in the country, which is making sure the president isn't about to die.
Nope, I think they lied to us all. They knew it was happening, and they were like, damn to the American people.
It's entirely possible. It's just a really big lie. It's just a really big lie.
If you've only got 5 people in the know and those lips never open up their mouths, then the lie keeps to go forever. Now, I don't think that's the case. I think anybody who was anybody in the Democratic Party, especially the higher levels, knew right away. And the reason they won't spread it is because they know it's leverage. That's when lies don't get spread, is when they're used.
Oh yeah, that's the Diddy. That's the Diddy bit, right?
Yeah, you bet.
He videoed everyone to use his leverage. I don't know. It's really hard to keep a secret in Washington, D.C. that big. Like
even about budget meetings, it's hard to keep secrets.
Yeah.
Simple stuff, right?
If he was receiving chemotherapy or radiation treatments, chemotherapy, I guess theoretically would be easier to hide because you could do it there. Radiation treatments would be much harder to do.
You'd
have
to go somewhere. You'd
have
to go somewhere. To Walter Reed. He'd have to go to Walter Reed for all of this, unless there's a facility in the White House. He was never in the White House at all. Remember how there was a bunch of those fake stages? It's not hard to go set up his own facility, especially if the money's there.
This is the crazy part, though. Like if he's going to get all this treatment every couple of weeks or every whatever, someone would say it, right? Someone would walk past a room and see him in there.
They'd have to.
It's entirely possible that this lie, I think it's probably probable. I'm just always of the belief that the bigger a lie gets, the harder it is for it to survive under its own weight. Which is why, like, when they say, we never landed on the moon, millions of people worked on the space program. Expecting all of them to keep that secret, and their spouses and their friends. It's a lot. It's a lot of secret keeping for people who by nature don't keep secrets. But we'll keep looking at it. We'll keep following it.
Well, that's the age of the internet for us. I mean, even if they pulled that off, it's shocking.
Yeah. So. I guess we could end on a little bit of good news. I sent this to you, and I guess you weren't aware of this technology. They're called rare breed triggers. Triggers. It's called a forced reset trigger. And that was a device that very much like a bump stock or like a trigger crank. That was a device that would basically make it easy to shoot a semi-automatic firearm quickly. And Biden administration had sued this company, Rare Breed Triggers, saying that they were selling unlawful machine guns. The Trump administration, Trump DOJ, just settled that. Let me get rid of this. They just settled that lawsuit and basically gave the company the green light. And this is what Pam Bondi said this past week. This Department of Justice believes that the Second Amendment is not a second-class right, and we are glad to end this needless cycle of litigation with a settlement that will enhance public safety. So basically what they've said is Rare Breed Triggers can continue to manufacture and sell this equipment as long as they don't make one that's marketed and sold for handguns. I assume that's not going to make the AR-15 model off limits because you can have an AR-15 handgun.
Yeah.
But they can't build one just for a Glock, for example. And here is the video of the inside of an AR-15. That's the trigger mechanism of the AR-15. The important thing for people to know Josh, you know this, but people might not understand how it works. What differentiates an AR-15 from, for example, an M4 and M16 is that every time you pull the trigger of a semi-automatic AR-15, that trigger needs to reset before you can pull it again to fire a second shot. And if you watch this animation, I think it's going to go, yeah, this animation, it'll show you that when you pull the trigger, it releases the hammer, hits the firing pin, that sends the bullet down the barrel, and then the gases push the bolt back to cycle it. To cycle it to, this is going very slow. Here we go. To cycle it to reset the hammer, right? And when you reset the hammer, you're supposed to let go of the trigger to allow it to reset, and then you can pull it again once the bolt pushes back into battery. What the forced reset trigger does is right here. They have a different design. You'll notice that it's a different shaped hammer, but also there's this little lever right here on the back of the trigger. And what you'll see, can I make this faster? Here we go. What you'll see is as the hammer is released, hitting the firing pin, that'll send the bullet down the barrel. It'll send the gases pushing the bolt back. It will reset the hammer, same as normal, but you see how it pushes just a tiny bit on that little lever right here, that green lever. Yeah. The act of pushing it just a tiny bit resets the trigger forcefully. So normally, under a normal AR-15, that trigger gets reset by spring tension. With a rare breed trigger, the trigger is reset with the entire force of the bolt being slammed back into the spring.
Wow.
So what that means is the trigger will reset without you having to let up off the trigger finger. So you just hold it down, and unless you have superhuman strength, it will reset even through you holding it down, which means you can fire the gun semi-automatically as fast as it literally will fire.
Jeez. No, and I had no idea that they settled this lawsuit. It was kind of one of those quiet releases over a weekend, and this is kind of a big release.
Yeah,
like this is one of the the promises made to the Second Amendment groups out there, since they ran on this. So first off, it's great that again another promise made, promise kept. But man, they released this one just a little more quiet than they like to. But I think there's a bunch of these about to happen. I think there's some stuff with the ATF we're going to start seeing here too.
Oh, for sure. Absolute sure.
I can't wait. I mean, I texted you earlier, hey, ho, ho, the ATF has got to go, right?
There's some rumblings that they are trying in Trump's big, beautiful bill. I doubt it'll get through, but they're trying to remove suppressors from the ATF's purview. No more tax, no more registration. That was in discussion. I don't think it made it through committee. So that means it would have to make it on the floor for a floor vote, which is unlikely, but still possible if enough patriots, enough conservatives let their voice heard and demand that their representative vote for it. Because a lot of times when they do amendments like this, all of the Democrats will be there and half of the Republicans won't be there. So it physically can't pass. And the Republicans then say, "Oh, I didn't vote against it. I just wasn't there." Right? Mm-hmm. That's the game they love to play.
It's another one of those.
But it is entirely possible that it gets added. This is a must-pass piece of legislation where it would make sense. So if you haven't already, make sure you reach out to your member of Congress and your senators to demand that they do this. There are, though, this is kind of funny to watch. This is from Firearm Policy Coalition. After previously being denied, multiple states have refiled their motion to intervene in the lawsuit over the classification of the force reset trigger. So basically, states had tried to intervene to work with the Biden administration. The judge said, no, this is a lawsuit against the DOJ. You don't get to do it. Now the DOJ is settled. These states are trying to resurrect it, which I don't think is going to work. But again, these are states that have already banned it inside their own jurisdictions.
Hey, Colorado's about to face a full semi-automatic weapons ban. So good thing they allowed us to grandfather some really old rifles in. And the Department of, it's not the Interior, it's the states. I think it's the states part of this, the wildlife and wilderness of Colorado. Anyway, they're the ones that are going to give you the training so you can go do the unknown number of hours in order to apply for the permit to get yourself a handgun.
Yeah.
Right. So the government now makes a ton of money off of people's right to own a gun. And I don't even know what this education is going to look like. And then your sheriff gets to say yes or no, whether you can have it or not. The most draconian laws are in Colorado right now, King. This is the I put out a post today saying, Donald Trump, please help us. Because what does this ruling mean for Colorado? Because those are specifically mentioned in the Colorado ban too. And I would be facing state felony charges if I or anyone else owned it, right? And I don't have those triggers. I never bought that stuff just because I didn't want to deal with it, right? And
part of the settlement is also that the government has to give back all of the triggers that they stole from people.
Oh my
or that
goodness.
They force people to surrender, which is going to make it interesting because a lot of times that evidence goes missing.
Of course it does. They destroyed it.
What will happen is you will go to the ATF and you will hand it over and you say, I'm handing this over under protest. Can I have a form that I can fill out showing that's under protest? And they're not supposed to do anything to it until the court cases that involve it are settled. A lot of times they say, oh, oopsie daisy. It went to the wood chipper. we shredded it. Sorry. And these things aren't cheap. They're like $500.
Are they really? See, that's the other part of it. I just can't afford the cool toys. I would love to have something on like that on a submachine gun or like an AR rifle, dude. That would be sick. I can't afford all the bullets I'd end up shooting. But again, like it goes back to like fully automatic weapons were something that a lot of people enjoyed before the 38 ban. So I almost feel like there shouldn't be a prohibition on that stuff, fully automatic weapons or suppressors. But that's the libertarian in me. The other part of me is I don't want that stuff showing up on the south streets of Chicago. But here's the kicker. It already is because the cartels are arming these kids with some really interesting weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
don't know, man. I kind of want it to go away. I want the ATF to disappear. I would love to see the IRS somewhat disappear. But, it's the only kind of it's the only freedom we have that they love to jail us over. And it's their favorite one to use.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So.
Only other good news is that the Supreme Court is allowing Donald Trump to rescind the parole that was granted to 500,000 illegal aliens. So they're now going to be on their way out. And I also saw that the DOJ has set up a task force in Los Angeles where they are pouring through every database to find every illegal alien who is about to be released. They're going to federal judges. They're getting criminal warrants for felony reentry.
Whoa.
And they're showing up to the LA County jail and the different jails in Los Angeles and forcing them to hand them over, because the way the sanctuary city laws work is to say, unless you have a criminal warrant, and up until this point, it's too hard. There's too many of them. You can't get a criminal warrant for all of these people. Now the Trump administration has actually tasked an entire task force with studying the release dates and everything, and getting criminal warrants for every illegal alien criminal in LA custody, forcing them to hand them over. So that's a little bit good news.
Also, and right before we got on, Trump was touting that he's got a deal between Putin and Zelensky to de-escalate the war.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just happened today. You want to talk about the first 120 days just being a whirlwind. I want more. Let's not slow down here.
I know.
Come on, guys. Let's keep it rolling here. Let's empty every room in the Pentagon if you can. Let's empty every room at the FBI. Let's start figuring out where all that money is going. I don't know how I feel about the big beautiful deal. I mean, it increases debt to a tremendous amount. Might hit in the 60s.
Yeah.
I mean that, but at the same time, it's welcome to politics. It's all about money, power, and sex.
Yep. Well, I think we'll end it on that. That's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like it, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, so you can find us there. We also have the audio edition of the podcast, which is starting to grow again. So if you subscribe to the audio edition of the podcast, that's available everywhere audio podcasts are found. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podbean, Audible, all great places. Give us a subscribe over there, and it will auto-download when episodes are up. That's it for this edition. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling.
Remember, the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together. See you next time.
See ya.